This lesson is titled, No One Can Really Know That God Exists. And I guess what I'm trying to do here is address the claim that sometimes you hear that you can't really argue for God's existence. You can't just do that through arguments. Sometimes you might hear it put this way: you can't prove that God exists. And it kind of depends what you mean by prove. If you mean like a mathematical proof, a logical proof where you can lay out all the premises and get to a conclusion that has absolute certainty, is necessarily true. If you want that kind of argument, well, maybe not in that sense. But there's lots of other ways at which we can get to God, and so I want to just profile one. I guess you could say I'm gonna move into classical apologetics this morning. So a lot of the stuff we've been doing is a take on trying to get at some of the postmodern stuff and trying to get to the relativism that's out there, the relativism about truth, the relativism about your perspective and my perspective and your truth and my truth and all that kind of stuff. And so this is moving us. I want to put out an argument this morning that will be familiar, I hope, to most, maybe all of you, but I just want to run through those arguments and say, if I wanted to try to sit down and present a case to somebody who might be skeptical of God, then this is the argument that I would use. There's lots of arguments. In fact, we can talk about whole families of argument. The first cause argument, the idea that sometimes called the cosmological argument, the idea that there's got to be an explanation for why there's something rather than nothing. There's a whole family of arguments that come in under that one. So I'm just going to pick one this morning to look at, and we'll go through that. I'm just going to skip that, I think. Thank you. That's all very interesting stuff, but we'll skip that. Here is obviously a verse that you've heard me quote multiple times before. But let your hearts honor Christ. The Lord is holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. And so those answers are out there. We have a command to give an answer. And the reason I say that is because some of these people who say there are no arguments for God's existence, we cannot make a case for God's existence, such a thing does not exist. They might be aware of the cosmological argument or the design argument or whatever. They might be aware of those and go, oh no, they're just no good. It's not even bother doing that. And yet Peter offers the command. You need to give a defense. And if you can't give a reason why you think there is one God, it's the God of heaven, it's the God that we worship, if you cannot give a reason why you think there is a God waiting for you at the end, there's a God waiting for you in heaven to receive you and give you your reward that you think should be yours because you're a Christian. If you don't know that there's such a God, don't know why there is such a God, then that's going to be not much of a defense that you've got to give to people. And we have lots of examples. I think about Paul on Mars Hill in Athens. He goes up there, and here he is. He's confronted by people who do not believe in God, who do not believe that there is any kind of work by God in the world around us. And he stands up and he makes his case, and he says, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. So the idea there that, look, he's trying to find common ground. And this is one of the interesting things about most of the Greeks. Most of the Greek schools, the Platonists and the Aristotelians and other thinkers that were in Athens at that time, most of them actually believed in God. They believe that there's got to be a reason why the universe runs the way it does. And there were some who weren't. But he's trying to find common ground with most of the people who would have been in that audience that day. So I'm going to lay it out real simple. There's about 6 different options here that we could talk about. And maybe if we have time at the end of the class, we can visit some of those other options. But just to keep things simple, this morning, I just want to look at 3 different options for why is there something rather than nothing. This is classic, right? So this is stuff that I think every Christian should try to get familiar with at the very least. So one option is just to say, look, the universe just happened. The universe is uncaused. It's just here, and it's been here forever, an eternal universe. And so we don't need to offer an explanation for why there is something rather than nothing, because something has always existed, and that's just the way. And by the way, there are some who say, look, this a number, whatever you want to call it, another option that fits in here among these three is that, look, we don't have to give any answers. The questions about why is there something rather than nothing, that's not even a question that we want to answer. But I think that we as Christians should answer that. Whether the atheist wants to answer that question is up to him. But I think we should give reasons for that. So that's the first option. The universe is basically, it's been here forever. We don't need to explain how it came to be because it has always existed. A second option is that the universe is self-caused. So it did have a beginning. It did start. There is a reason why it came into being. But basically it made itself. And that's probably the strongest view that's out there today. That's the one that you will hear the atheist make more than any others. And then the third option is that the universe had to have a cause. And of course you can't say the universe caused itself. That's the problem with the second one, right? So it's got to be some cause outside the universe that can explain the universe that we see, right? And hopefully this is stuff that I'm hoping you've heard this before, so all I'm doing is reviewing today. I'm hoping that one is anyway. So let's look real quickly at the idea that the universe has no cause. It's always existed. There was no beginning. Some material thing, some material stuff has always existed in some form or another. And there's two options here for the atheists that they'll put forward. One's called the steady state theory. The steady state theory. So it's the idea that the universe is as we see it today. We're looking at telescopes and everything else. The universe as we see it today it's just always been here. There's been stars burning, coming into being, burning out again, galaxies swirling around, all sorts of collisions. But basically, it's not that the universe is not moving, that there's no action. It's just that it always has existed, pretty much the way that we see it today. Another view is called the oscillating universe theory. And this is the idea, and we'll get more to this as we move into the second part. But the idea is that there's been a big bang, and a big crunch, and a big bang, and a big crunch, and a big bang. So what has always been? There's always been something, but it has changed. It's expanded and contracted, expanded, contracted for eternity, right? There's just no limit to that kind of idea. So we'll look at that. So probably a good guy to start off with is Carl Sagan, atheist, and he did this very famous series back in the late 70s called Cosmos, and by the way, I think you can go online, YouTube, and watch this. It's been remade recently with another American astronomer, cosmologist. I don't think anywhere near as good as the original, really. But anyway, here's the classic, Carl Sagan. He's a guy, who'd step out, on the coastline and say, billions and billions of years ago, and, our universe came into being. But he said this, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. That's a classic expression of the idea something has always been here. Something has always existed. We don't really need to do anything more than say that. Although he does say this possibly. He says, referring to Hindu cosmology, he says, there is the idea of an infinite cycle of births and deaths and an infinite number of universes, each with its own gods. Now, Sagan is no more a Hindu than he is a Christian, right? That's not the point. He's not trying to shill for Hinduism. His point is that, in fact, if you look at that video, that section, in fact, this is the episode 1 is the first quote, and episode 10 is the second quote, just in case you want to know. But in that episode 10 quote, he's basically saying, look, it's the fault of Christians. It's you guys who believe in the Bible, who believe that there's a beginning. You ruined it for everybody. You know, if we had gotten lucky and we had Hindu cosmology, then we would be okay with the idea of an eternal universe. We'd be okay with a universe that was created and destroyed and created and destroyed. We'd be okay with that. And so he's kind of offering that as, you know, he knows he's in trouble. He knows he needs to offer his viewers an answer for why there's something rather than nothing. And his answer for why there is something rather than nothing is, it's your fault. You know, if you Christians hadn't turned up with the Bible, we wouldn't have had to answer that question with your "in the beginning God created" nonsense. You know, we wouldn't have to have done that. But you know, we would have been better off with the Hindus, and we could have seen the universe is eternal. It's always been here, created, destroyed all the way along. So that's the idea. Here's an argument against that. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Very simple argument. And the thing is that first premise there, whatever begins to exist has a cause, we know that. You know, that's something that's used in science all the time, the principle of causation, that we're looking for something adequate and something prior and something that is going to explain why it exists. You walk into a room and you look up and there's a broken window. Ooh, I wonder how that broken window got there. Then there's a ball sitting in the middle of the room, and you go, oh, well, I wonder where that ball came from. I have no idea. And you see a kid outside with a cricket bat and looking all sheepish. Wow, I wonder how that ball got in here. You know, you're still wondering. I wonder what happened. And yet somehow, no, we're actually able to kind of put two and two together and understand cause and effect. The ball just didn't arrive there. You know, the window just didn't get broken. You know, and because that's what the kid would say. How did this happen, kid? And I don't know. You know, that's the kid's answer as to why it is. And it turns out when you come up to an atheist and go, well, how did this get here? You know, you're angry at the atheist. How did this get here? Well, I don't know. Same answer as the 10-year-old with the cricket bat. That's kind of what you get. And but it's the idea. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, and that's pretty much where we are today. Even most atheists will agree that the universe had a beginning. And that's the problem with the steady state theory. The problem with the steady state theory is that really no one believes that anymore. It looks like the universe has a cause. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And it looks like the universe began to exist. It had a beginning, and so the universe had a cause. And so here's the problem with the idea that something has always existed. The universe is eternal. It's just always been here. First of all, it's a problem from consensus. The steady state theory is rejected. And that's for a whole sequence of reasons. One reason is Einstein. Einstein looked at his equations and he realized as he looked at his equations that gravity would demand that the universe should be expanding. And he actually inserted something into his equations called the cosmological constant that stopped the universe from expanding. And later on, he said that was his biggest mistake. One of the biggest regrets he had was to try to put a factor, into that equation that would stop the universe from expanding. So pretty much everyone understands that the universe is expanding. Then some research began to come in from telescopes looking at galaxies. The galaxies seem to be drifting apart from one another, seem to be expanding. The universe seems to be expanding. By the way, it's not consistent, but it seems to be expanding. And so people began to realize, if the universe is expanding, if it's moving out, if it's growing, then there must have been a time when it was not, when it was all kind of in one place. And if that's the case, then the universe cannot be steady state. It has not always been the way that we see it today. It had a beginning. And this actually was very controversial when it came out. In fact, the name, Big Bang, was coined by someone who wanted to make fun of that theory. There were others who resisted the idea of the Big Bang because they saw it had clear theological consequences. You know, if you say the universe had a beginning, there's that Genesis 1:1 thing in the beginning. It just, no, we don't want that. We can't believe that. And so it was actually not very popular to begin with. But yeah, pretty much everyone, even atheists, accept that the steady state theory is wrong. Oscillating universe theory has been pretty much, every now and then it will come up. Someone will suggest the oscillating universe theory again, but all the current data indicates that the universe is expanding at a rate that cannot be overcome by gravity. In other words, there's not going to be a big crunch. Give you the statistic, again, there'll be a test on this later on. 70 kilometers per second per megaparsec. That's the expansion rate that's currently measured. And basically, it's just stuff is spreading so far apart so quickly that there will never be a big crunch. So we're not going to get Big Bang, big crunch, Big Bang, it's just not going to happen. So the oscillating universe theory is not very well accepted today, even among atheists. You've got problems from basic assumptions of science, the principle of causality. If you've got something here, it needs an explanation. You need to be able to give a reason for that, as we talked about with the cricket incident. And we have the problems from basic physics. So, second law of thermodynamics basically says that the amount of energy available for work is getting less over time, and things are running down. And so, if the universe is running down, that implies that there was a time when it was wound up, and so that again, we've got to get a point. You've got to have a beginning point. It's just everything is pointing toward a singularity. Everything is pointing toward a point where you've got to explain everything. And so far, you know, it looks like Genesis 1:1 has got to be the best description that we've had for thousands of years about how things started off. In the beginning, that's a point in time or beginning. A cause, a sufficient cause, God created the heavens and the earth. And we're sticking with that. You know, that's going to be something that the first option, the uncaused option, the eternal universe option just doesn't look right. And so that's consistent with what we understand of creation. Let's look at the universe has its own cause. Normally, it's the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the go-to theory here. In fact, William Lane Craig, who is probably one of the best that I know, one of the best apologists out there. Very, very smart guy, philosophy professor at the University of Texas, has been around for quite a while. Great books. I love his books. But he believes that there was a Big Bang so many billions of years ago, but he thinks that God kind of kicked the whole thing off. So he believes in the Big Bang and then says you need God to explain the Big Bang. And it's kind of like Paul saying, you know, there's a God who's out there and who doesn't live in a house made with human hands. Kind of like that. He's trying to find that common ground with the atheist that he's arguing with. But I would say that the Big Bang, we don't need the Big Bang, right? We don't have to have the Big Bang. But what the Big Bang is doing is it's forcing the atheist to say, you know, here's your best and brightest theory for how the universe began. You know, just take God out of the picture for a minute here. You know, here's your best and brightest picture for how the universe began, and so you've got to explain how that happened. One way or another, you've got to give us an answer for how we got the universe. Now, I think there's certain problems with the Big Bang. We've got problems from the basic assumptions of science. One is the principle of uniformity, and you know, the problem is that normally what we expect is that the laws of science will apply just as well on the moons of Jupiter as they do here on Earth. We would think that the laws of science would apply just as well here on, you know, in 2016 as they, you know, in our time as it would in the time of Moses or Abraham, right? So there's a uniformity there. We have certain expectations. This is the way that science works. And so what we're asking with the Big Bang is that there are conditions, you know, in the first nanoseconds or femtoseconds or whatever they are, the first few seconds of the universe, that somehow are different from every other time of the universe. We're asking for exceptions. I think that's one of the big problems with the Big Bang. You've got to come up with some exceptions for how it is that something, all that stuff that's in the Big Bang, something came from nothing. How do you do that? And how does it do it all by itself? With no one just making a choice for that to happen. Just for some reason there was nothing, and then there's the universe and me and you, and we don't see that anywhere else. There's nowhere else in the universe where we see that happening. So what you've got to do is make exceptions for the first few seconds of the universe, or first microseconds of the universe, and that seems to be a problem, I think. I want to see some good arguments here. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. As far as the Big Bang itself, there's what I call the lumpy universe problem. So here's the problem: is that if the universe is expanding and it's meant to have this consistent 3-degree Kelvin microwave background radiation throughout the universe, why is it that in fact we have clusters of galaxies? We have a lumpy universe, and they're having a hard time explaining the lumpy universe. There's the unruly galaxies problem. So the idea is you have this Big Bang, it's expanding out in all directions, and it should be that all the galaxies should be going in the same direction. It should all just be expanding out. And sometimes you'll see an illustration that they'll show on TV and stuff. They'll get a balloon, and they'll draw, they'll get a pen and they'll draw dots on the balloon, right? And then you blow into the balloon and you see these dots on the surface of the balloon expanding out from one another. And that's kind of meant to be the model of the Big Bang, the idea all these dots on the balloon are all expanding out as you blow up the balloon. And so that's the idea with galaxies in the universe. As the universe is expanding, all these galaxies are separating out from each other, should be in uniform ways. Theoretically, it's how the explosion should happen. But in fact, you find that there are whole rivers of galaxy that are not consistent with that. They're actually going against the flow, as it were, of where all the galaxies should be expanding, and they're going in different directions. So that's a problem. You have the missing matter problem. You may have heard of dark energy and dark matter. Here is stuff, depending on who you hear, 80%, 90%, 99%. I hear different figures all the time. Here's all this stuff that's meant to make the Big Bang work. It's meant to make the universe work. And we have no idea what it is. Well, that's what the scientists say. We can't see it, can't touch it, can't feel it. The equations of the Big Bang demand that it be there. But we don't have it. There's no evidence. It's not out there. And then problems with basic physics. First law of thermodynamics says that neither matter nor energy are in a closed system are created or destroyed. So how do you get that? How do you get all that tremendous amount of matter and energy out of nothing? That just, again, there's a law of physics that we use everywhere all the time. Steam engines, wherever. We use these laws all over the place, and they work. We understand that they work. You put the coal in the engine, and the wheel, heats up the water, and the steam drives the wheels, and wheels go round and round, and all the rest of it. And we understand that. And you stop putting coal in the engine, and it eventually runs out, right? It's the second law, but you got to have the energy there. You can't just make the wheels move around and without energy, and you can't just create that power, that work for that steam engine. And so you can't just create that out of nothing, and that's the first law. So these were laws that were well established in the early days of kind of the formative years of physics, and so that would seem to be a problem as well. And so I'm not, although I love what William Lane Craig does, and he's a great guy, and I appreciate a lot of stuff that he does, I'm not ready to just embrace the Big Bang as an explanation. We'll give you guys the Big Bang from 17 billion years ago, but we're going to have God, kick off the Big Bang. We're going to have God light the fuse. No, I think there are problems with the Big Bang theory, and I think we see the creation there in Genesis 1. But anyway, so how do you get past those kind of problems. You got someone like Alan Guth, who many years ago said this: our universe emerged from nothing. But you always see the qualification. A universe emerged from nothing. Almost nothing. You see, it's the almost that's the catch, right? The universe might be the ultimate free lunch. The thing is, somebody has got to pay the price, right? Somebody's going to pay. There is no free lunch. Somebody has to pay the price. That's why sometimes you hear about if, well, look, our healthcare is free. No, healthcare is not free. Somebody has to pay for that. So, so how do you pay for the universe? Moving forward, that's 1988. Here's 2010, Stephen Hawking and Leonard Lobnow, a book called The Grand Design. Because there is a law like gravity, they say, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Wait a minute. Because there's a law like gravity, that's something. And not only are they giving themselves, they give themselves a gift, the law of gravity, but really, the law of gravity has to be sitting on something, right? The only way that we can come up with the laws of nature is if there is nature to describe, right? You've got to have nature, and then we look at nature, and we see the regularities in nature, and because of those regularities, we infer laws, scientific laws about nature. So how do you get that without there being something? So again, it's a big gift with that. So, here's some of the things is, if the law created the universe, the problem with that is that without, like I said, without nature, there's no laws of nature, and laws can't create anything. The laws by themselves can't do anything. They need stuff to work on, right? So you can't avoid there being something to begin with. Here's something a little bit, bring it up a couple more years, 2012, a universe from nothing. All right, so just in case you have any doubt at all about what this argument is trying to put forward, that Lawrence Krauss is doing here, universe from nothing. And notice, let me see, I don't know if I have this little pointers here, but notice the one of the guys, afterword by Richard Dawkins. Right? Well, who's Richard Dawkins? Is he a cosmologist? No. Is he an astronomer? No. Is he a physicist? No. He's an evolutionist. Right? He's a biologist. He's an evolutionist. He is, first and foremost, an atheist. So if there's any doubt at all that this is a problem for atheists and they need an explanation, a universe from nothing, then the endorsement by Richard Dawkins, the atheist, is proof positive that this is really what they need. They need an answer that is something from nothing. So you've probably already been reading it, but here's what he wrote. The laws of quantum mechanics imply that on a very small scales, for very short times, empty space can appear to be a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles and fields widely fluctuating in magnitude. It can be truly said that we all are here today because of quantum fluctuations in what is essentially nothing. Now, he put the emphasis on nothing. That was the idea, right? It came from nothing. Essentially nothing, right? And it turns out really that there is not nothing. If you have quantum fluctuations, you have stuff, you have things, you have laws in place, you've given yourself quite a lot, quite a big gift if you give yourselves everything like that. So here's a response from George F.R. Ellis. He's South African, but we'll still read from him anyway. So he does not explain, talking about Krauss, does not explain in what way these entities could have pre-existed the coming into being of the universe, why they should have existed at all. Above all, Krauss does not address why the laws of physics exist, why they have the form they have, or what kind of manifestation they existed before the universe existed. So he goes on and on about this. So, it's just, the trouble is, people like Krauss and Lobnow and Hawking and so on, they actually sometimes come right out and just say, look, we're just going to ignore logic, we're going to ignore definitions about what nothing really is, we're going to ignore philosophy, and the arguments and what logic would demand. We're just going to kind of ignore all that and just say it anyway. The universe came from nothing. And then when they actually get into it, you realize their definition of nothing is not nothing. And so you're going to continue to see these books. You'll see them reviewed in the local paper. You'll see them online referred to. Somebody will give some of your favorite atheist friends will give a link to it on Facebook. You will continue to see these claims being made. But something from nothing? No, it's just not going to happen, right? So if some stuff has always existed, really the only thing you've got to do is you're going back to option one. So remember option one that just said something has always existed. We don't need to give a cause, it's just always been here. And then that's going to put you in exactly all the problems that we encounter with option one, now option two has to face. And in fact, this is the guy I've talked about quite a lot, David Walker, my friendly neighborhood atheist professor. When we were going through these options in his class, I said, so which one are you going to choose? Which one would you choose? And he said, well, and he put it like this, he said, well, I guess I just bite the bullet and say some things always existed. Now, this is a guy who's trained in science and physics as well as being a philosopher, right? So that's kind of exactly why we get to this point. So we're going to kind of go around in circles. We know from the evidence of the universe must have a beginning. All our explanations for how something could come from nothing fail. So we're back to denying that the universe had a beginning and then admitting the universe had a beginning. Just go round and round in a circle. See how it goes? It's just you're going to go from option one to option two to option one to option two. It's just going to go round and round and round in circles. There's really no way to break out of that vicious circle because there's no answer here for why something should come from nothing, and there's no evidence and no reason why the universe, the material universe, has always existed. So that's the problem, right? Option one, option two. Before I go on, let's stop here, because I know that's a lot of science for a Sunday morning, for a Bible class. So questions, comments, before I move on to the right answer. Anybody? Any questions about thermodynamics? Anybody has for me? Anything? Quantum fluctuations? Anybody? No? All right. Good, because I don't know if I can answer them. All right. All right. So the universe has a cause. So why is there something rather than nothing? So uncaused doesn't work. The physical universe needs a beginning. Self-caused doesn't work. The physical world needs an explanation. You just can't walk away and say it just is. Something came from nothing. And so we have option three, and that is the physical world needs a cause. It needs an adequate cause. So it's got to be something that's proportional to what we have. So whatever the cause is, you think about, you walk into that living room and you see the cricket ball on the floor and you see the broken window and you see a kitty cat standing right next to the little cricket ball, and you go, oh, look at you, you were able to throw that ball through the window. Oh, what a clever kitty. No, that's not going to do it. You're a little crazy, by the way, but no, you're not. That's not going to cut it. You need an adequate cause. You need a cause that's up to the task of being able to explain what you saw. And so here we have the universe, and we need to explain this, right? We need to explain all that we have. So whatever cause it is, it's got to be up to the task. What can account for that? And listen, when we say these things about God, when we say, God is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving, eternal, He's a creator, when we say these things about Him, when we say that, for instance, He is, He's non-contingent. He doesn't depend for anything else on His existence. When we say these kind of things, we're not just making this stuff up in the sense that it's just very convenient that we have a God that's like this. No, that's just what we mean by God. When we say God, that's just what we mean. And by the way, I think that this can help us when it comes to some theories and arguments that we find out there sometimes. If somebody comes up with a view about God the Father, or a view about God the Son, or a view about God the Holy Spirit, that in some way makes any one of those persons of the Godhood less than they are, then there's a problem. That's a problem, right? If Christ, if Jesus, or the Holy Spirit, or the Father ends up looking something less than what we mean by God, then there's a real problem there. So that's just what we mean by that word. So it's got to be something that exists, and it's got to be something that is powerful enough to account for the universe. It's got to be something that is eternal, something that has always been. And it can't be the universe itself. It's got to be something other than the universe, something that's capable of being eternal. Nothing physical can be eternal. So it can't be something physical. It's got to be something non-physical. It's got to be something that's always been around. Because otherwise we're into the problem of, well, where do we explain where that cause came from? So that cause itself has got to be eternal. It needs to be an antecedent cause. In other words, it's got to come before. When we have the universe, the cause has got to be prior to the universe. The boy with the cricket bat has got to exist before the crack in the window and the ball on the floor, right? That's just the way it's got to be. It's got to be something that's before. You can't explain this universe by something that's in the universe. This is what needs explaining. You've got to go outside, beyond, behind it, before it, in order to account why we have something rather than nothing. And so you can't have something that depends on the universe for its existence. And again, I think of Acts chapter 17, I think of Paul's saying, look, God doesn't live in a house made with human hands. He doesn't depend on us for his existence. It's not as though somehow if we were to stop coming and worshipping and praying before him, that God would cease to exist. Or if we stop putting money in the plate on Sunday, I'm not suggesting you do that, but if we stop putting money in the plate on Sunday, somehow God would poof and he would just cease to exist, right? He doesn't depend on us for his existence. We depend on him for our existence. So it's got to be an antecedent cause. I'll finish off with this verse. Isaiah, writing and recording God's words here. God says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall become like wool." And God wasn't talking to outright atheists. He was talking to the children of Israel who had broken his covenant promises. And they needed to know why they worshipped the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and worship him alone, no other gods. And today there's a real need to know why we worship the same God under the new covenant. And we can no longer assume that people believe in God. We can no longer assume that people believe in the God of the Bible. We can no longer assume that after they become Christians, we get them baptized, that their faith will remain solid and that they won't be swayed by the arguments of unbelievers. We can't assume that our kids are going to go to university and keep on believing and keep on being faithful and keep on attending worship services. That our simple admonitions to keep the faith will be followed. That they will, when they get to those classes at university, they will be harangued. They will be, immersed in all sorts of arguments against God's existence from philosophy, psychology, astronomy, sociology, and they'll try to undermine their faith. And so at some point, we need to know why we believe what we believe. I think about, if you go to Isaiah chapter 41, I don't have it up on the screen, but Isaiah chapter 41, verses 21 through 24, I think it's very interesting the approach that God takes there. Again, remember, he's not talking to people who deny that there's any God at all. He's talking to people who have committed spiritual adultery, right? They have their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they want their other gods as well. And God makes this argument and makes this appeal to them. Show me that these other gods are real. Let them come forth with their reasons. Tell them what's happened in the past. Tell them what's happened now. Let them tell you what's going to happen in the future. Let them say anything at all. Say something at all to show that they exist. And of course, the problem is that the false gods, the idols, are dumb in the politically incorrect way that we say dumb, right? It is they are unable to speak, and because of that, they've really got no reason to believe and follow and worship at the feet of those false gods. And so, who are you going to worship? Those atheists have no reasons for believing that something could come from nothing, or that something could have existed forever. And so that's just all they've got. That's why they count the problem of suffering, which we talked about last Sunday, the problem of suffering, as their silver bullet. Because they know that, we can go back and forth about the evidence and the scientific evidence and the philosophical arguments. They know we can go back and forth to that. But what's the real emotional kicker here? For how can we get people to see that those arguments maybe don't hold water? Maybe what we can do is convince them that your God is a horrible God because he's not doing anything about the problem of suffering. That's why they keep coming back to the problem of suffering, because on this stuff they really don't have as good a case as they lead you to believe that they have. And unfortunately, the way that these things usually run in philosophy classes and so on, when someone signs up and does a philosophy of religion class at university, or goes into an intro to philosophy 101 type class, or whatever it is, they don't allow these arguments to be made. They basically say, well, here's the first cause argument, here's what's wrong with that. And they use arguments that have been around for about 300 years, as if nobody has updated them. Nobody, no one like William Lane Craig, nobody has come along and re-examined the evidence since then. And so you don't even get a good presentation of, an unprejudiced, unbiased presentation of the pros and cons to these arguments. You're only going to get one version of that argument. And so we really need to make sure our kids, our young people growing up, before they get to university, in fact, before they get to high school, they need to really be drilled in this stuff. They really need to know why they believe what they believe. I think we've run out of time, but any comments, questions?
We haven't touched on the purpose, so
yeah, purpose in the universe. Look. There's a whole realm of stuff, some wonderful stuff that's out there. Would have been a whole separate lesson on the just rightness of the universe. It looks like the universe is made for us, and that is something that is very, very difficult to overcome. A video that you might want to watch as part of maybe a midweek Bible study or Sunday morning Bible study, Privileged Planet, well worth taking a look at. Privileged Planet. So it'll be very, very good to look at. All right. Thank you.